says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one who loves me is the one who loving? And whiteness is something folk run to like it's even some black people. Hey, shout out to you, Tim Scott and others. We're gonna talk about you today to 866 because in many circles he's accepted. It's like that. Who's it? The Dave Chappelle, Clayton, the Blind Klansman. Oh, what's his name? Clayton Bixby.
Clayton Bixby. Yeah. Nah, we're not gonna do that with Tim Scott. Listen, y'all
all
always
right, all right. Let's use Tim Scott as a proxy for Clarence Thomas. 866-801-8255. And you're right. You're absolutely right. It's too easy and cheesy to do that to designate people as sellouts because they benefit from their ability to sell out black people to other to people who identify with this power structure. We can get derailed because the conversation should be liberation. So I'm gonna move on. Don't you get me into this, Don. Don Calloway is here. What?
Listen, I'm gonna go ahead and put it out there. I'm not gonna be no closet fan. I will tell y'all, and this gets me on trouble on television and here once or twice. Tim Scott is a personal friend of mine, and I find Tim Scott to be a fundamentally good and decent man. Full stop. Let's stop there.
Okay. Now, you know what? Hold on. Pause. I respect that. You know why I respect that? Because I don't know Tim Scott. I only know what I see of Tim Scott in his gums, but I don't know him as a human being enough to have a conversation about him as a man. But if you do know, I'm going to respect because I care about you, Don Calloway, and I respect you enough to say if you value Tim Scott's relationship, then I'm going to stand down and sit and wait.
I'm not saying stand down. I'm saying that Tim Scott has put himself in a position as a grown-ass man to receive and possibly deserve and defend himself against all of the scrutiny that he gets. I know him individually, and I find him to be a good and decent man, but he should have to stand and defend his record just like Donald Trump, just like Barack Obama, and everybody else who chooses to volunteer themselves for public service. Because ain't nobody
let me ask you this, because hold on, Don Calloway's here. Yesterday, TD Jakes did a sermon a few years ago where he talked about the three types of people in your life: the confidants, the constituents, and the comrades, right? And he broke it down like the confidants, of course, sounds like what it is. People ride or die, they're with you no matter what, right or wrong. If you're wrong, they're going to talk to you in private, not in public, because they're your ride or dies. Constituents are people who are there, maybe there's something of value that you both exchange, but when the next thing comes along, they may not be there with you. They're not ride or die. But, most of us have constituents in our lives, people who, when they like what they like, that's good. When they don't, they move on. And if, they could be fair weather. And then there are the comrades where y'all might be in the trenches together because you have a common enemy. But when a kind of common enemy is either vanquished or goes, away, then that person goes away as well. Is Tim Scott a confidant, constituent, or a comrade?
I don't know, and I would probably need more time to think through that as a rubric. This is my first time being introduced to him. I can tell you that he and I came of age in Washington, D.C. as grown-ups in the practice and profession of politics at the same time and got to know each other. And as a result, I found him to be not a terrible human being. We've worked together on a lot of things, particularly for the advancement of black banks. But, he's just an interesting guy. Here's what I will say about Tim Scott. I think he genuinely in his heart has conservative beliefs, and I think he represents a vast segment that us as liberal progressives, particularly talkers,
don't put me in that category, because I may not be. No, because I think most black people actually have very conservative values. We just can't abide by the racism, and this is the weird thing that the Republican Party has. Or those that call themselves conservative. And the autopsy showed this. If you would just stop being racist, you would probably have a whole lot of black people, in your party, but you've told us you don't want us. So that makes me look at Tim Scott with a side eye out the left corner of my right eye, because how do you sit in a party where they are openly racist? How do you even and don't challenge them? Because I haven't seen him come out and say anything. What I see Chris Christie doing, Tim Scott could easily do that, and they basically told you in words that they don't want you, and you still there.
So you have to remember that Tim Scott has been a member of the Senate and the House, but most of the Senate for a long time now. As a matter of fact, he had one of the greatest Twitter clapbacks of all time. in which he said somebody, you know, who probably didn't identify with his politics says Tim Scott is a terrible house nigga, and Tim retweeted it, was like Senate actually, which was amazing, right? I think it's just awesome.
That is amazing.
Anyway,
yeah.
funny to me, political humor. But you got to remember, Tim has been a member of the legislative body, so he has done a lot of standing up for black folks behind the scenes. Things that are bad could have been worse were it not for Tim Scott. He personally obstructed a whole lot of the worst Klansmen of judges and Klanswomen of federal judges. He personally obstructed those who would not be in favor of the Voting Rights Act, for instance. So I know he's done a lot of good personal work on that. But I guess it's easy to do what Chris Christie's doing, because Chris Christie ain't accountable to nobody. He ain't holding nobody's office, right? And even when he was an executive. But you didn't see Chris Christie doing this when he was the executive.
He's a complete opportunist.
He's a sucker MC.
And he's a complete yes. And
yes.
he does not go to St. John's University.
I run my fingers through her hair as she smiles and says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one you're lusting is the one